Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Samach Hey, and we're up to Masiv Rav Avia, which is on the fourth line. And we're talking about the interpretation of Shmuel of Rav Chizda on Samach Daled Amid Beis. Shmuel made a statement, Da v'da achas. And what that means, according to Rav Chizda's interpretation, is whether or not the katan is on the lower level of das, which is called srar v'zarko egos v'notlo, or he's on an even higher level of das, of chefetz u'machziro. In both cases, according to Rav Chizda's understanding of Shmuel, he can be zocha for himself, but not for acherim. And now the Gemara is going to analyze a Mishnah in the fourth parak of Masechet with regard to Pidyon Masechet. We know that on the first, second, fourth, and fifth years of the cycle of Shemitah, we're mafresh in addition to Maser Rishon, Maser Sheni. And Maser Sheni is Mamon Hegdesh, and it needs Pidyon. The Torah requires that you add an extra chomesh to its value in order to be poded. However, with regard to Pidyon Maser Sheni, the Mishnah establishes something called Harama. Now, although Harama in general, when you sort of find a loophole in the law, is not something recommended, but it seems that with regard to Maser Sheni, and we'll see why, Amir Hashem, the Harama is acceptable. What is the Harama? And this is the Mishnah that Rav Avia quotes here to reject Rav Chizda's interpretation of Shmuel. Ma'arimin al Maser Sheni. Now here's the deal. How can you make a Harama and avoid the extra chomesh in Pidiyas Maser Sheni? Well, what you could do is, you could have someone being podeh on your behalf. Ketzad, Omer Adam Libno Ubito Agdolim. He could ask one of his children who are Gdolim, and since they're Gdolim, they are financially independent of their father, and therefore Yotzu Mirshus Avihem, and they could be considered acherim, a different entity, and they will be podeh the Maser Sheni of their father and avoid the need to add a chomesh. Furthermore, a man could say li avdo v'shivchaso ha'ivrim. So a Pidyon Maser Sheni can be implemented by an Eved or a Shivcha, as long as it's an Eved Ivri, a Shivcha Ivris. Halachem mos halalu. I'm giving you these mos. You don't have to shell out from your own pocket. That's what the father's saying. Upidu bahen Maser Sheni zeh, and use these mos to transfer the kedusha of Maser Sheni onto these mos. And since you are what we call acherim, therefore, there's no need or requirement to add a chomesh. Now the Kedusha as Maser Sheni has been transferred over to the mos, and the Bailim will take those mos up to Yerushalayim and buy food, betara, and eat it in Yerushalayim. Now, as we've seen in the past, a Shivcha Yisraelis must be by definition a ketana, because a shivcha goes out lecherus with simone narus, so she must be by definition a ketana. If you don't idiasi shtei saros, my boy gabe. If she already has shtei saros, then she reaches the stage of narus, and she's mufka from shivchus. So shivchus and narus are mutually exclusive. And if we're talking about a shivcha, then by definition, we're talking about a shivcha who's a ketana, and she has not produced shtei saros. El avlo asya shtei saros. Now, here the Gemara wants to prove, and that's the argument of Rav Avia, that a katan could be zocha for acherim. How is this so? And this would slug up Rav Chizda's understanding of Shmuel. So we're going to go now with two approaches. First, the approach of Rashi. Rashi understands that pidyon peros masasheni equals zocha v'racherim. Why is that so? Because through the process of pidyon, you are taking hegdesh, because masasheni is mama gavor mama hegdesh, and you are transforming it through chil peros to meiser hedjot, to mammon hedjot. So you're taking it out of the rishus gavor and you're bringing it into the rishus hedjot, and you're doing so on behalf of the bailim, and that's called zocha lacherim. So we see here that a katana could be zocha lacherim, and that's against Rav Chizda. However, the Tosas Rosh has a different shot. And he's analyzing the question of the mos, not the peros, but the mos. How does the father, or in the case of the shivcha, the adon, effectuate a transfer of mos over to the shivcha, who's a ketana? Now, we make a distinction between a katan zochali atzmo as opposed to zochel acherim. And that means that according to Rav Chizda and Shmuel, it takes less das to achieve zochel atzmo than it does to zochel acherim. So when a katan is being zochel for himself or herself and understands what it means to own mammon, they have the full-fledged das, which the Chachamim evaluate as enough das to be zochel atzmo, but they can't be zochel acherim, because that requires a higher level of das insofar as they get no benefit from it. And therefore argues the Tosa Rosh from the fact that the katana could be zochen these mos. She's not being zochen the mos for herself. She's only being zochen the mos on behalf of the adon, her master, in order to effectuate a pidyon on the mos. So therefore, if we hold, like Rav Chizda's interpretation, that a katan is not zochel acherim, then in this case of mos, the katan would not be able to be zochel liatz. And the Gemara answers, the Torah in the Parsha of Truma says kisavo, and Chazal interpret kisavo as bias kulchem. So Truma and Masa likewise is only chal midaraisa when there's bias kulchem, and the people of Israel settle in the land. Bisman hazeh, we don't have that. It's after Golus, and Maser bisman hazeh is an enterprise. That's the Rabbanon. When the Rabbanon established Maser, they established that a ktana can effectuate through the Aknos Mos a pidyon on Maser Sheni. Now, I would like to make the following comment. We learned yesterday on Daf Samach Daled that with regard to a takana d'Rabbanan, sometimes we apply the principle of ke'ein d'oraisa tikkun. Other times we do not. And what determines whether it's ke'ein d'oraisa? For example, in shituf muvos, we say that a katan could be zocher in the yayin or the pas lechem on behalf of all the balei hamavui, because shituf muvos is d'Rabbanan, because with the rice there's no issa to carry from the mavui to the chutz, from the chutz to the bayis. So the Rabbanan, in the Gemara's language, created something to less lay ikar min haTorah. And that's why we don't have to match up to the din d'oraisa. So my comment here is that in the case of Maser Sheni d'Rabbanan bisman hazeh, shall we apply the same principle of lesle ikar min haTorah in order to recognize and validate Pedias Maser Sheni through a katan? I didn't find anyone who points this out, but I'm sure it's somewhere. So again, if you're asking whether a katan could be zocha lacherim or not, it depends upon Doraisa versus Rabbanan, but even in Rabbanans, it would only apply that a katan could have a valid zechiyah lacherim if it's ein lo ikar min haTorah. So the Gemara asks the following: how could you tell me that the Mishnah is talking about Maser Sheni b'zman hazeh? The Mishnah is talking about a Shivcha Yisraelis, otherwise known as an Amavriya. We don't have an Amavriya b'zman hazeh. The law of Amavriya applies only when there's Yovel. For Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Ein Eved Ivri Noeg El B'zman Shayovel Noeg. The Torah in Parshas Bahar says, Yovel Hi Tielachem. And we derive from that the din of Eved Ivri is Noeg only B'zman Shayovel Noeg. Because then we can apply the next part of the pasuk that says, Ve'ish al mishpachto tashuvu, referring to an Eved. And our Mishnah must be talking Bisman sheyesh bias kulchem, that Yisrael is al admasam, and there's a din of Yovel, and therefore there's a din of Amavriya, and therefore there's a din of Truma Maser, and it would all be Doraisa. So we're back to square one with Akasha against Rav Chizda. How could it be that a katan, or in this case a ketana, is zochal acherem b'pidya Maser Sheni? Elo, says the Gemara, we're going to look for another interpretation of this brisa, or shall we say of this Mishnah, I should say, that the Mishnah is talking about the Rabbanan. And I would have said at this point, Yerakos. Yeah, but Yerakos is not going to give the Gemara a good answer because that's Yeshlo Ikar Min HaTorah. You're only extending Chameshes Mini Dagan to include Yerakos or Perasei Elon. That's already Ke'ein Da'oraisa Tikkun. So therefore the Gemara comes up with a brand new enterprise of Maser D'Rabbanan, and that is Ela Otzit Sheinu Nakuv D'Rabbanan. On a D'Oraisa level, if it's Eino Nakuv, it's not perforated, and it's not drawing its nourishment from the ground, therefore it's not considered part of the ground, and it doesn't have Kedushas Karka of Eretz Yisrael, there's no Chiyuv Maser. But the Rabbanan established a Chiyuv Maser because it's similar to an Otzit Nakuv, but this is considered a davar de lespe ikar min haTorah, then we don't apply the principle of kol d'Rabbanan kein d'oraisa tikkun, and therefore we can say that the Rabbanan rely on a ketana to be zoche for acheret. Omar Rav shalosh midos bekatan. There are 3 shiurim in the zechiyah of a katan. Number 1, tzror v'zorko eves v'notlo. A katan has enough das to distinguish between an even, which he throws back into the pond because it's worthless, as opposed to an egos, a walnut which has value to it. Is zochel yatzma ve'in zochel acher. He has enough das to be zochel for himself, but he doesn't have that extra level of das that we spoke about earlier to be zochel for others. So that's the basic level, what we call the first midah of the 3 midos that are mapped out here by Rav. Ukenegdo Mektana, Rava adds the following: that if you find a girl that has that level of das, of Tzror v'zarko eviv v'notlo, then is kadeshes l'min. If a mother, in the case of a Yisova min Avia, would marry her off, she has kiddushay d'Rabbanan. She has enough das to understand that if somebody gives her kesef kiddushin, she'll hold on to the kesef kiddushin, and the Rabbanan therefore established that her mother or her brothers could marry her off with kiddushay miyun, and kiddushay miyun means that if she wants to get out of the marriage, then she doesn't need to get. We don't have Kiddushay Torah, but all she needs is miyun. If, on the other hand, she has not even reached that basic bottom level of Zorei of tzvar v'zokah goes for notlo, then before that shear, she doesn't have das. She doesn't know what Kiddushin is all about. She can't even hold on to a kesef Kiddushin. She doesn't even need milin. There's no chalos Kiddushin even midrabanan. Hapa'utos. Now we're up to the next level of the shalosh midos of Rava. And now we're talking about a katan who has enough charifus, and he's up to the age somewhere between 6 and 12 relative to the particular katan. And mikhan mekachu memkara mekar b'metaltalin. They have a yad to buy and sell metaltalin. And that's the takonis chacham, because otherwise, the children will not be able to survive, to maintain themselves. They can't buy food. They have to go to the supermarket and buy their breakfast, lunch, and supper. And they have to also sell things in order to buy, with the money that they get, to purchase mizonos. If a ketana has the same level of das as this higher level of pa'utos, then if her father was makabel kiddushin, which means that she's married midoraisa, and then her father died, she has a yad to be makabel her own get. She's included under what's called mishalcha v'ena chozeres. And then we get to the third midah. Now, before we get to the third midah, I just want to point out that what's missing in the Gemara, according to my understanding, is that other level that we spoke about earlier on Daf Samach Daled Amud Beis, and that was Chefetz Umachziro Liachar Shah, where we say was Zocher Ben Liasu Ben Lachir. So if I assume that Rava accepts Rav Chizda in Shmuel, then Davidah Achasi, and there's no difference between Tzvar v'Zarka gives an outlaw on the one hand and Chefetz Umachzir Lachar Shah. That distinction is attributed to Rabbi Yehuda or Rav Asi, and that shita has what's called a katan zochel acherim, but Shmuel doesn't have katan zochel acherim. So if you have katan zochel acherim, then you have another midah here, will come out to be 4 midos, of chefetz machzir lachar shah. But if you hold like Shmuel, and there's no zochel acherim in the case of a katan, then there's no difference between tzrar v'zokek v'nochlo and chefetz umachzir lachar shah. In both cases, he could be zochel yatzmo, but eno zochel acherim. So now we get to the third midah. Higiula onos hanidarim. This means 1 year before bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, and it means for a boy he's 12, for a girl she's 11. Now this is a real shir doraisa of higil in lonis nidarim, and therefore we're going to add yom echad, 12 and a day for a boy, and 11 in a day for a girl. The dream nedavik deshin kekish. Now, what that means is that we check them out with a bedika, and we have to ask them if they yodim l'shem mi nadru, if the neder is l'shem shamayim or l'shem mi yagdishu. Now, if they haven't reached this age of 12 for a boy and 11 for a girl, then the nedarim is not valid. The hegdish is not valid, even if they can pass the test. Ukenegam v'ktana, and a parallel shear in a case of a ketana, which would mean l'chora 11 and 1 day, choletzes. It means that, let's say she has shtei saros, and she's igil lishnos onas nidarim 11, so she's 11 and shtei saros, is then she needs chalitza. If her husband dies without leaving any children from himself, then if he has a live brother, she needs chalitza. If, on the other hand, let's say she has shtei saros before the age of higil onas hanidarim, then we consider it as shuma, and she doesn't have the status of a nara for chalitza. Now, I interpreted this Gemara based on Tosfos Alib the Rashi. Tosfos has a problem with this because Rava in Masechet Nida himself holds that Eina Choletzes Ela Gedola means she's only when she's 12 does she require chalitza. Here she's only 11, and that's halacha in Nedarim. But according to Rava in Masechet Nida, that's not halacha in Gadlus for chalitza. So the Rashbam says that the word kinegdom here means the shear of a katan of nidarim nivdakim, which means shtemesre. So the kinegdon is referring to the shear of a katan, which means he's 12, and in the case of a girl, then she needs chalitza because she's already a gedol. And honestly, Lefi Anistaiti, the Rashbam makes a lot more sense than Rashi. Weiter. Rava makes another distinction between a child who's now a gadol and a katan, and it has the same status as a katan. Limkar b'nichsei of, we're talking about karka. A son inherits his father's real estate. He cannot sell it. Ad she'ehei ben esru. He's considered like a katan until the age of 20. His sale is not valid, and the reason for that is that in order to sell karka, you need to be a baki b'tiv maso mata. You have to be an expert, a chachma yisera, a special chachma. And the Rabbanim made a takana that until he's 20, his sale of karka is not valid. The Mishnah now is going to deal with shlichus in a get. And of course, a ketana does not have shlichus. So therefore, the Mishnah says, ketana shomer is kabel li giti. She appoints a shliach lekabbalah, and she was married off by her father. Eino gerat she'giget liyada. She cannot appoint a shliach. Lefichach im rotza bal lachzor yachzor. The Baal could decide that he pulls out from this gerushin until the get reaches her head, because the shliach is not a shliach. Shein katan a shliach. Now, why is it that ein katan osa shliach? The simple answer to that question, which is actually the Ravid's hasog on the Rambam and Gerushin Perek Vav, is that we have a halacha of shlichus derived from Truma, and in the Parsha Truma which says atem. There's an extra word atem. And atem gam atem l'rabo shluchachim. So the extra word atem is coming to be mar b'shliach. And it's gam atem. It's they, meaning the shliach, like you. Ma atem b'nei das, av shlucha b'nei das. So a shliach has to be a ben das, and a katan cannot be a shliach. But the Rambam has a whole nother pshat. And the Rambam says that the reason why a ketana cannot create a shliach lekabbalah, even though chatzera kona lagita kigdola, if she owns a chatzer, it could be kona the get for. So why can't she create a shliach? We assume that chatzer mitam shlichus. And the answer, says the Rambam, is because a shliach lekabbalah needs eidim. As we saw in the previous Mishnah, we need two eidim to appoint a shliach lekabbalah. The ein meidin ala katan she'enu ben das kamur. And Reb Chaim has a lot of Torah to try to explain this Rambam. The Ravid says it's atem gamat. The Amar lo avia, the father says to the shliach, tsevis kabel abiti gita, and rotzalach so lo yachs. Now, if she cannot appoint a shliach lekabbalah, then the Baal could appoint only a shliach lo'lacha, but her father represents her because she's a ketana, and he could appoint a shliach lekabbalah. And therefore, the moment that the get reaches the hand of the shliach kabbalah appointed by the father of this ketana, the gerushin is chal immediately, and the Baal cannot be choser. Mishnah continues. Here we're going to get into a major machlokas. When a person says to a shliach, you know what, makom ploni, in that location. How much, to what extent is the shliach bound by that makom ploni? For example, the son of love in makom ach. Let's say the shliach gave the get in a different place. He, in a sense, violated the will of the mishalech. Possible. The simple understanding is possible. That's the Tanakama. Why? Because the Baal is makbid. He wants the get to be given in a certain place. He doesn't want to, he doesn't want other people in the other place to say bad things about him, that he's divorcing his wife. He wants it here at that place. So therefore, the shliach has violated the purview of his shlichus, and therefore the shlichus is batel. Harei b'makom ploni, or for example, the Baal. Oh, now here it doesn't say that you should give the get in that place, but rather he says to the shliach, you know what? Harei b'makom ploni. You want to know where to find her? You'll find her in Paris. The son of Makom Acher, he found her in Marseille, and he gave it to her in Marseille as kosher. Because here in this case, even the Chachamim, who disagree with Rabbi Elazar, as we'll soon see, they would agree that he's only being Mar Mokom. He's trying to make it easier for the shliach to tell him to get on a train to Paris. The Mishnah now analyzes, when do we say a woman has kpeda when she sends a shliach? I want you to accept a get in that place. He went to a different place and he received the get. Possible. Because she had commanded the shliach to be makabel get from makom ploni, and she's makbid on that. She doesn't want to get married, divorced in a different place, and people speak about her bignus. However, in this sefer, not in the Reisha, Rabbi Elazar machshir. In other words, with regard to a shliach appointed by the isha, we're not going to say that she's makpedes. She wants the shliach to fulfill a shlichus, and the fact that she had said b'makom ploni was only mara makom hula. If she says to the shliach haveli gittin mimakom ploni vevilo makom acher kosher, here's a case where even the Tanakama agrees to the principle of Rabbi Elazar of mara makom ilo, in a case where she appoints a shliach of hava to bring her the get. And she says, bring me the get from such and such a place. He brought it from a different place. That's where he found the Baal. He was on his way to that place, and lo and behold, he sees the Baal. So the Baal gives him a get. Kosher, even the Tanakhama would agree in this case, she's not maktim. The Gemara says, Rabbi Elazar, Maishna Reisha lo Polig, Maishna Sefer de Polig. Why is it in the Reisha, when the Baal says to his shliach, Tein get liishti b'makom ploni, Rabbi Elazar is silent, and his silence indicates acquiescence, and he accepts the sheet of the Tanakama that we say that the Baal is makbid. He wants the get to be given dafka in that makom. And yet, Rabbi Elazar himself in the Sefer, with regard to the shliach appointed by the Isha, and she says, it's kabli giti makom ploni, Rabbi Elazar is liberal, and he says that wherever he accepts the get is chal, and there's no kpeda. And the Gemara answers, Iu, with regard to the Baal in the Reisha, the Medame, Demidaite Megarish, Gerishin is only Chal Midas, Das Machna of the Baal is copied. Then we assume that the Baal wants to do it exactly the way he wants it to do it. And Dafka Makom Ploni, but not in Makom Acher. And even Rabbi Elazar agrees to that. But when she, the Miskareshes, is appointing a Shliach Kabbalah Bal Karcha Miskareshes, we don't even need her Ratzon. She doesn't know where and when the Baal is going to agree to divorce her. Is therefore the Svara is, according to Rabbi Elazar, Makom Yilo, when she says it's Kabbalah Giti Makom Ploni, she's only giving him a clue and a hint, a pointer to make it easier for the Shliach to find the Baal. But if he finds the Baal elsewhere, then that's fine. And now we get to the Mishnah. A woman says to Shliach, Have li giti. My husband is a Kohen, and I want you to bring me the get. I'll continue eating truma as an Ashes Kohen Kinyan Kaspo until the get reaches my hand. And therefore, Chelos b'Trumat She'agir get liyada, because she said Have ligit. But his kabel ligite, which means that the very moment that the get reaches the hands of the Shliach Kabbalah, she's megureshes. She no longer is in the reshus of her husband, who's a Kohen, is asur lechel trum miyad. She doesn't know. Maybe immediately after she appointed the Shliach found her husband and got the get. So she better be very careful, because the zar shachal truma is chayiv misa b'dei shamayim. The Mishnah continues, his kabel igite b'makom ploni ochels b'trumat she'agia get lo so makom. If she tells the shliach, you know where you're going to find my husband, b'makom ploni, and then the shliach Kabbalah, when he finds the get, the baal b'makom ploni receives the get, then she no longer eats truma. But in the meantime, until we know that the Baal caught up to the Shliach in Makom Ploni, until we know that, we don't have to be choshesh that maybe somehow the Shliach found the Baal prematurely and received the get, and therefore she can't eat truma. No. The get is not chal until the Shliach Kabbalah receives the get, and we assume that he won't receive the get until he comes and arrives at Makom Ploni, where he'll find the Baal. Rabbi Lazar also miyad. Rabbi Lazar says, being consistent with the previous Mishnah, that she's not being makpid on the Shliach, that the get would only be chal if it's given to the Shliach b'makom ploni. She's just mara makom ilo, and therefore we should be choshesh that maybe as soon as he left the city gates, he encountered the Baal gave him the get, and even though it's not b'makom ploni, the get is chal. So that the Tanakama here of this sefer of the Mishnah, who says that Ochels b'Trumat She'agia get lo so makom, he's of the opinion that she, when she appoints the Shliach LeKabbalah, she says b'makom ploni, she's makbid on that makom ploni. So until we know that the Baal arrived at makom ploni, then the get is not chal, and she can continue eat truma midin kinyan kaspa. So again, this whole discussion here between Tanakama and Rabbi Lazar is regarding a Shliach LeKabbalah. Correct, the Gemara, I don't understand the Tanakama in the Sefer. The Gita Miyahavi. What is the Tanakama saying? That once the get arrives at the specified location, then the get will be chal. Ha'amrit Reisha, the Mishnah in the previous Mishnah, quoting the Tanakama, says that when an Isha says to a Shliach LeKabbalah Sagidu Makom Mesuyam, and if a woman specifies the location, and then the Shliach went ahead, he was Makabel in a different location, Lavi Gita, it's not a get at all. So what is the language of Ad She'agia Le'oso Makom? What do you mean Ad She'agia Le'oso Makom? Meaning he's carrying the get and he arrives at that place. Once he receives the get in a different location, then the shlichus is bottom. The get is invalid. Lo tzricha diyomer kabeli gita b'mata machasya. She said to the Shliach Kabbalah, you'll find my husband in a place called Mata Machasya. But you might find him in a different location in Bavel. And this is what she really is saying to the Shliach. Mishkal means to take something, shakil in Aramaic, in order to receive the get from him. Wherever you find him, take the get. And I'm not being makpid on a specific makom. I'm only telling you that you'll probably find him in Mata Machasya.